Oh, okay. I can't start the video. That's fine. So I have shared the screen. Hi everyone. So
Priya, Priya, would you just give the video rights?
Oh, sorry. I'll just do it.
Sorry to interrupt, Kishore.
no, that's all right. I have three messages.
Yep, all good.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So welcome to the third session on the data analytics workshop. So again, we thank the ISDI IIT main organizers for supporting us throughout these events. So in the first session, what we did was introduce in a brief introduction into mainly Python, because Python is the main language that we are using for analyzing the data and using different libraries. And then we discussed why Python is the preferred option, not just for this workshop, in general throughout the world, why Python is a preferred option for a from a data analysis perspective, like how you have a lot of open source libraries available with Python in contrast to some other proprietary softwares. So that was what we discussed in the first workshop, where we tried to understand how Python loops work, what are the Python data types, and what are mainly the four important data containers in Python, like lists, tuples, sets, and the dictionaries. Then after learning about the basics of Python in first session, we then moved on to second session, where we added some important open source data libraries to understand that helps in so that helps in using advanced data structures for storing our data and for analyzing the data. So some of the libraries we touched upon mainly were NumPy, that is important for handling Python arrays. Then we had Skippy, which is mainly for scientific computation. And then you have Matplotlib, which we have not discussed yet, which we have Matplotlib, which is for visualization purposes. Then you have got Pandas, which is sort of a comprehensive library that has all those functions, as in it does work with NumPy and other things, but it encompasses most of the things. So just using Pandas, you can do many of the things like reading a file, doing some little modifications and doing analysis, so which we will see today. Some of it we'll see today. Um, so in this, so that was what we touched upon in second session. So to recap those things, uh, we will jump to this one. So we have got all these libraries where so we already touched upon NumPy and then the scientific Python library as well. Those two were done in previous sessions. So today we will be starting with Matplotlib to give you an understanding of how to use the visualization toolkit available in Python, how to use it for different sort of illustrative purpose, like a bar graph, like a box plot. There are different types of plots that are applicable in different scenarios that help you gain better understanding into a data, like especially initially when you want to explore a data and just get some important insights, preliminary insights from the data before doing advanced analysis. So even visualization itself acts as a analysis in many places, because it gives you the way you visualize the data will itself give you a lot of insights, which you can use to make some preliminary decisions, and also then also select which sort of advanced data analysis algorithm, or if you are using say some machine learning type of algorithm, which sort of algorithm you have to focus on. So visualization is a very important aspect in data analysis. Then we will move on to Pandas. So a brief introduction to the Pandas library has been given in the previous session. So we'll just build on that and do some more advanced analysis and implementation, and how to read data from CSV files and things like that. And finally, in the next session, we will briefly touch upon scikit-learn, so which is a library for machine learning in Python. Now, obviously, machine learning is a huge field, so we obviously cannot cover, we cannot even like make a dent in that in a 1 or 2 session. But we'll still give a very brief introduction, just an overview to what exactly is machine learning and how it's sort of changed the entire day. Because especially nowadays, if someone says data analysis, it's almost sort of conflated with machine learning without even like, although you do have some non-machine learning type of analysis, like using basic statistics and other things, but machine learning has sort of penetrated all the fields. So where you have to do predictive modeling and things like that. So like how we discussed in the first session, so you have like a descriptive data analysis, where you where, for example, you just visualize the data and see what the data is about, or just calculate the mean and variance and see that. Then you have a diagnostic data analysis to understand why some of the important reasons in the data. Then you have the predictive modeling and the prescriptive modeling. So of these four, predictive modeling or prescriptive modeling, they are the most comprehensive one, as in they encompass, or they are supersets of all these descriptive modeling and everything. So if you are doing a predictive modeling, so in turn you are describing the data, as well as you are diagnosing what is the issues, say, or what, or those sort of things. And then you are doing predictive modeling as well, which normally involves like get the past data and then predict the future, that sort of thing. So like a, say, a standard linear regression, where you are like, you in a locality, for example, you have got you have a data set that describes the pricing of houses in a locality over, say, past 10 years or something like that, using which you can develop a model and then say, okay, how the prices are likely to vary over the next period of say a month or a next year. So, and say how the situation like a COVID-19 or pandemic has affected, and how that will affect the pricing. And there are a lot of things. So predictive modeling sort of is a superset that encompasses your descriptive analysis and the diagnostic analysis and all the things. So we will so keeping all this in mind, we will touch upon these machine learning library functions briefly in the next session. So just to recap, so NumPy we have already discussed enough, and just to recap the scientific Python toolkit, which was given. So it is mainly built on NumPy. Now, although your NumPy library has got enough mathematical functions of its own, this one is a better version, as in it has got more dedicated and also optimized functions that are more efficient to handle some of the mathematical problems. And also it has got some prototypes which helps you connect it with MATLAB better. So you can read the data from MATLAB into this one Python using this, or you can write to a .mat file which can be read by your MATLAB. So those sort of cross-platform efficiency is given as well. So Skippy is like, it's organized as different modules, where you would have a module, say, for example, this .linalg, which is for linear algebra. So where if you want to deal with matrices or determinants, or you want to compute a matrix inverse, those sort of things are done by this linear algebra module. Then you have got a signal processing module, so which implements most of your signal processing type of operations, like a filtering or those sort of things. And then you have got, say, this .nd image module, which is for multi-dimensional image processing. So where you can handle images, read images, or process images. And the reason it says multi-dimensional images is that images are by default two-dimensional, as in you just have a width and a height. But there are, of course, images that are three-dimensional and four-dimensional as well, like a medical image would be a three-dimensional image. So those sort of things. Then you can see there is an interpolate submodule, which focuses on mainly the interpolation aspects, where like you have a time series curve, and you have the data spread over 10 days, and then you might have the data missing for 1 or 2 days in between. depending on how the data is varying, you can fill in the data for those particular days. So these are different type of submodules, and as you can see, these are that is why this particular library is important, because this has got this wide range of dedicated functions for these mathematical functions. For example, if you want to say for example, you want to implement this integration, say integration of 0 to 5 x cubed dx, which is pretty straightforward. So you can implement that using this import cp.integrate, then dot integrate dot quad. So you have x to the power of 3, lower limit being 0, upper limit being 5. So that's sort of in a line you can implement that integrate function. Then you have got the inverse function. So where you have got this, say for example, you define a 3 by 3 matrix np.random.ran, which gives you a 3 by 3 matrix, and this linalg.inv gives the inverse function, inverse matrix. So which is A inverse is 1 by determinant of A into adjacence of A. So I hope you know that. Otherwise also it's fine. I mean, it's just to understand like how you determine the inverse of a matrix. Then eigenvalues are, for example, one of the most important concepts in mathematical optimizations, where when you are determining the correlation between two vectors, or like you have data sets and you want to capture some correlation and covariances, things like that, and eigenvalues play a very important role. So you can use this function to directly compute the eigenvalues of this matrix. You have got 3 eigenvalues here corresponding to a 3 by 3 matrix. So eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So that's sort of just a brief recap of how we did that. And then you have the matplotlib pyplot, so which is like a Python plotting package. So which has got a lot of command style functions for producing the graphs. So I'm not going to go into detail into this. We'll get into it in a meanwhile. So you have got different graphs like this: bar plots, line plots, all these plots. So if you want to plot, for example, a simple plot like this, you have got import matplotlib.pyplot. So that is, matplotlib is the main library. So if you are importing that, import matplotlib.pyplot, say import it as plt. Then if you want to plot just a vector of 4 numbers, then plt.plot. So you have this list which is of length 4. You have got 0, 1, 2, 3. So x-axis is some numbers. So you just plot that. So you if you want to plot that, so 0 is 0, here's 0, 1, 2. So that's one thing. That's just again, I'm not going to detail this because Saurav will discuss in a brief while get detailed using the Jupyter Notebook. Just show some demonstration and how we can use matplotlib for different types of graphs. But just to give you an idea of how visualization is important, like for example, you can see here small multiples like provide context and context. So you can see here, for example, you have got different cities here, data from different cities here, where even though like here there is no data here. So where you have got the y-axis, which is wind speed, and x-axis, which is the wind direction. So based on that, you can compare the wind speed in different countries, and you can see how it is distributed here and how there is no how there is missing data here. And for example, if you come here, you can see how this graph can be this plot can be constructed. So by constructing a mapping from numeric domain to color range, so that shows the distribution of, say, unemployment rates by countries. So yeah, so these are different type of things. So for example, if you want to map from numbers to colors, so here you can map. Here you can see this is sort of center distributed here. So how you can give different color codings if you want to highlight, say, mean of the particular data. Say you want to highlight median of the particular data. So depending on what you want to highlight, you can actually construct the graphs appropriately. So as they say, like picture is worth 1,000 words. So just using these pictures, you can tell a lot of stories on a particular data set, and how yeah, you would have come across like a lot of these economics analysis, like where they want to analyze like a country-wise unemployment rate, or say some GDP rate, those sort of things. So you can construct these lot of visually pleasing as well as highly informative tools that give you information. So that's visualization. And then as far as pandas is considered, so you have got these basically, you have got these key data processing stages, which we will discuss using pandas library, how we can do. Like for example, you have to first load the data, which then has to be prepared, like as in you have to do some transformations, like put it in row wise or arrange it column wise, those sort of things. Then is data cleaning, where if you have missing data or if you have some duplicates, those sort of things you have to remove. Then of course the visualization aspect, and ultimately ending with the predictive data modeling. So you might have your input data in the form of a CSV file or a pickle object. Now pickle object is a very useful object in Python, which is just a serial data, which just serializes the entire data set into a byte stream. So you can very efficiently write all of your data set into just one pickle file, which is very easy for transferring over the web or even otherwise. And then you can easily unpickle it and read it back. Then you have got the JSON files, or even the CSV files are obviously the most widely used. So we'll get into these things in a little while. So that's pretty much it. So we will be concentrating mainly on two things, as I mentioned. So one is start with matplotlib and get a brief idea of the visualization part, and then move on to advanced analysis with pandas and how you can load data from different CSV files, or how you can merge them, and yeah, so how you can create some advanced data structures, some very preliminary analysis. So that next week we can do some advanced machine learning type of analysis. So I hand it over to Saurav to briefly give an introduction to matplotlib. Then I'll take it back from him and go proceed with the pandas library. Saurav?
Yeah, thank you, Nanda. So I'll start with the session. Okay, so share my screen. Okay. All right. So, okay. So today we start with some of the basics of matplotlib in this session. So let's first begin with a very simple plot. So it's just a sine angle. Sorry, it's a sine function, and we'll have the angles in radians. So for this, we need to import matplotlib, and as Kishore showed you, so it will import pyplot as PLT, and this matplotlib inline command, this is required to plot show these plots along with this text here. So that is a special function provided for this Jupyter notebook. And along with that, for the mathematical operations, we need NumPy and math. So math we need for the definition of pi. So this can be obtained from CP as well. So first, let's create the x-axis. So for the x-axis, we use this arrange function. So that just gives us an array of numbers starting from 0 to 2 pi, and at the interval of 0.05. So that is the spacing. Now y equal to np.sinx. This gives us the y values, and then plot.plt.plot xy. So it's creates the plots. Similar to, I think you have used these similar things in MATLAB, but here you need to use this syntax plot plt.plot. So after that, you can create an x label, y label, and a title, and then plot.show will create this plot finally. So here we see. So it starts from 0 here, and it goes up to 2 pi, which falls somewhere like, it's basically a full cycle of a sine wave. So that's the very simple wave. Okay, now we can go for more customized plots. So So that was just a basic plot, but now we can do a few fancy things. So we take a simple data set here. So the data set is Y, which is okay, from 1, 4, 9, 16 like this, and two different x-axes are chosen, but against the same value. So, but their lengths are all same. So, all right. So now we can create two different plots. So one is against y against x1, and we want to plot this like a solid line with yellow color and square marker. And second one is what we plot against x2, which is a dashed line again with green color and a circle marker. And also we can add legends. So one of the legends is TV. So okay, let me first put this so that it will be easy for you to understand. So here a couple of things we have created. So we have the X label as medium and Y label as cells, and we have added two legends. And we can select the location, which is like lower right. So we can add like lower right or upper right or lower left, upper right, upper left, like that. So this is a customized plot. Now as we go on, now sometimes we need to create a subplot, that is more number of plots should be in place. So here we create a simple plot first, just three data, 1, 2, 3, and we'll create a subplot. First I'll create it so that it will be easy to understand. Yeah, so this subplot is creating a subplot. So 2, 1, 1, that means 2 rows and 1 column, and 1 is the first one of that. So as I think similar indexing you have seen in MATLAB. And then we plot it. So just range. Okay. All right. So and the second plot is a similar line, just a range which is goes from 0 to 12, and we want to have the background as yellow. So we have added this command here, like face color Y. So we can customize this even further. Now this add subplot is a special function, so that allows that the subplot will not overwrite the main plot. So here we have used this command instead of subplot, the add underscore subplot. So let's see how it works. So yeah, so if you see now, so we are doing the same plot, but here the second subplot is coming within the main body of this first plot. So it's like being added, so it is not overwriting the plot here. Okay, and then we can also insert some figure. So here, let's see. Okay, so you see, this is a main plot is a sine function, and we want to insert as an cos function in the inset. So here we can do it like this. So first is like a same thing that we did at the beginning. So x equal to range of this, and then y equal to np sine. And then along with that, when we are creating this plot here, so we are adding this cos function here. So so yeah, so we have two different axes here, and that is allowing us to so one is the main axis and a second is the inset axis. So by using this technique, we can insert this second figure in the inset of the main figure. So this is another flexible option that we have. Okay. Now, a bit more complex subplots we can have. So it's like a array of subplots, and we can select insert like number of rows and columns. So now it's like a array of plots. So for example, we have like if we have subplots 2 comma 2, so that means we have an array of 2 by 2, like that is a total 4 plots. If I go on executing this part, so we are just importing matplotlib and numpy. So what do we see here? The first one is like we are in indexing with A00. So we have created this plot by keep indexing it like figure comma A. So now we can use this array name A. And then like the first one is a x square function. And then the second one, A01, which is the square root of x. So which is here, and we are using the title, and A10, which is the plot here and in the bottom, and finally A11, which is a logarithmic function, so which is the fourth plot. So in this way we can use a grid or bigger bigger array of plots. Now here we can go for even more complex one and complex type of subplots. So here this is a 3 by 3 grid, but the sizes of the plots can be different. So first I'll execute this one so that you can, and then I'll go through the code so it will be easy to understand. Okay, so here we have 3 functions. One is exponential, one is logarithmic, and one is square. So first one we use at A1 as from subplot to grid. So 3 by 3. So that is like we will have, so this total space is actually 3 by 3. So that means we can have 3 rows and 3 columns, but we want to have variable size. So for the A1, we have a column span of 2. So that means a column span of 2, that is 2 columns will be used. A width of 2 columns will be used for this plot A1. So A1 is here. So that is this exponential one. So here, if you see, so it's actually a single a column. Sorry, it spans over the column space of 2 columns. Now for A2, if you see, it has row span of 3. So which is A2 is a square function. So this one, so it takes the whole span of 3 rows. So that means the whole, because we have chosen 3 by 3, so it takes the whole space. So but it takes by default just 1 column space. So so that's just it. And for the A3, we have a row span, that is 2, row span is 2 and column span is 2. Oh, and this tuple here, this is actually the, you can say that this is the starting point of this. So if I think, yeah, I have the quick syntax. So here, if I can show you the more details. So the first, this entry is like shape, then location, then row span, column span. So these are the things that we are entering here. So column span and row span you have understood, and the location is the sequence of 2 integers. So this is like location to place the axis within the grid. So just to clarify here, so based on this, the plot will be starting. And now going further, okay, now we are going to use another function, which is grid. So this one, basically earlier we had blank bodies of the plot. Now we can insert some grid lines in the background of the plot, and we can also customize them. So for the first one, it's just a cubic function, and we are just putting grid as true. So that takes the default grid, but then we can also customize the grid. So here in the second one, we are using color black, and then we have this is the line style, which is hash and dot. So which is, I think, very thin. It's like a lightly dotted lines, and then line width is 0.25. So these are the customized options that we have entered. And if we put no grid, which is by default set, so then it's like blank in the background. So I hope this is clear. Now we need to see some of the formatting of the axis. So this was some of the formatting with the plot. Now we see formatting of the axis. We can also do some operations. So first, again, execute this one. Okay. So the very first one is like different types of scales that we can use for our plot. So again, we are creating two different plots. So first one is here a0, which is an exponential function, and we are going to use it on a normal scale. And so we had two functions. One is x square, and another is exp. Now, similar thing we can do on a logarithmic scale also. So now a1 is the second one, and we are plotting the same two functions exp and x square, but we are modifying the y scale here as from linear to a log scale. So we can see clearly here. So that it's the same functions, but in T2 due to two different scales, the pattern of the curves are being seen as different. Now we can also customize the spines of the plots. So let's see, yeah. So we are just creating a normal plot, and just an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And so for the bottom spine, which is like this bottom line, which of x-axis, we are setting the color as blue. So you can see this is a very deep blue color here. And then left side one, we have chosen red. So this one is red. Then we can also increase the line width. So line width we has you set as 2. So you can see that this line width is slightly thicker than the x-axis line. Then the right line is like none. So right line is something here, which is nothing here at this point. Top also is none. So they are all missing. So this is how we can customize the spines of a plot. We can create limits also. Like plot can be of different distance, but we can limit some of our area of interest. So here we are creating a plot at first, which is going from the x-axis is from 0 to 10. Now this one here. Now we are setting the actually y limit as here, set y lim from 0 to 10,000. So this plot can go up from 0 to 10,000. So you can see the y-axis values are spanned from 0 to 10,000, and x lim is 0 to 10, which allows the plot to go from 0 to 10. But here, if you see, this is by default values are taken. So which like it goes from 0 to not 0 even. I think x-axis is somewhere in between 0 to 1 and goes up to slightly more than 9. And y-axis is also truncated at 8,000. So these things we can change easily. And next we can change the ticks and ticks labels also of the axis. So here, if we go through here, so earlier we had numerical values here, if you remember, for this plot. Maybe this one, yeah. So like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. So instead of that, here what we are doing, we are changing ticks. So we can first use this command ax.set ticks. So the ticks will be placed at 0, 2, 4, and 6. So these are the locations. and the labels are given as 0, 2, 4, and 6. And rest is just a simple sine wave. And y ticks also we can change it from 0, sorry, -1, 0, and 1. So we instead of this numerical, we also can add here some, modify these labels also. So maybe just can show you, for example, y ticks, say -1. I'm just using some arbitrary level. So yeah, here you can see that we have just updated the levels here. Okay. So twin axis is again, this is also sometimes we use. So we need to plot two different types of plots. So one is, but they have different scales. So we need to use both the y axis in the left and right side. So here, for example, so we want to plot an exponential function as well as a logarithmic function, but their scales are different, as you see. So we need to use both the left and right side y-axis. So for that, we x values we can keep the same, say 0 to 11, and but the y, if the very first one is exp. So this one, the blue one is the first plot, and then we can use this command a1 dot twine x. So this allows us, and we can set it as a2. So then we can use the second plot x comma input log x, and we are using red and a circle dot point. So then we can plot two different types of plot and two different scales. Yeah, this is just the legend x, exp, and log. So these are simple plots. Now we look into some of the specialized graphs or types of plots that we many times need to use. For example, this is a bar plot. So yeah, so this is a very simple bar plot. So we can have our axis. So the x-axis we want to have C, C++, Java, Python, and PHP. So these are the different type of language, and what are the different number of students who are going taking these languages. So these are the data 23, 20, 17, 35, 29, and 12. And then ax.bar, it just creates these bar graphs. It's a very simple one. Now we want to have slightly more customized kind of plot. So here, for example, we have multiple different types. So we want to have like multiple types of bars at some instance. So the data is, for example, entered as a this matrix here. So each row belongs to one particular type. So and there the data is actually grouped according to this way, row wise. So the first group you can see like 30, 40, and 35. So these data comes here in the first entry. Then second one 25, 23, 22, which is here. Then the next 50, 51, and 45, and finally 20, 17, and 19. So these are the data that are we are plotting as bars. And now we can customize. Some of the customization that we are doing here is adjusting the width. So we want to have bar widths of 0.25. So that is how we are creating this one. And colors. Oh, sorry. This first one is just the location of these bars, and their width is entered here as a separate parameter. So we just to ensure that there is no overlap. So we are just creating this plus and putting the numbers. So second one is now we want to have bars which are like starting on top of each other. So instead of side by side bars, sometimes we need to have bars on top of each other. So this is very simple. So when we are creating this bar here, so for example, we have in this data, the data is like main means, and women means. So these are averages, and we want to have the same width, and the axis is like this. So AX bar is the data is main means, and width is entered as 0.35 and color is red. Now on top of it, we want to start the second one, which is the second data, which is women means. Width is same, but when we need to insert this additional command here, which is bottom, and we set it equal to main mean. So instead of 0, it will start from where main means has started. So all these bars are coming on top of the first one. So then the rest of the things are customization. Say like arranging some legends and the ticks and all these things. So those are straightforward. Then one of the more very common or very useful thing in his statistical analysis, which is a histogram. So we have a data set here like this, random. It can be any data, and we want to create bins. So that means actually the x-axis is starting from 0 and 100. So, and we want to have bins of length 25. So let's see how it goes. So yeah, if you see here, so it's a histogram of these marks, and we want to see that number of students are taking. So these are the different numbers, and which number falls into which group. So accordingly, after this classification or kind of arranging the data into different bins, we create this histogram here. Then this is another interesting status plot that is used in statistics, which is pie chart. So here we have a data, say the different languages, C, C++, Java, Python, and PHP, and number of students in all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these 5 subjects. But this plot actually shows the data as the percentage of students of each subject. So it doesn't give you the data exactly, so it shows the percentage. So if you see here, so depending on the whole entered data, so what percentage is distributed into which category is shown here. Then this is a scatter plot. So I think this is also very commonly used. So it's basically 2-dimensional data. So you want to see the variation in a 2-dimensional axis. So for example, here is a set of data is girls grades and boys grade. So this is the grade range. So grade range varies from 0 to 10. I mean, it's starting from 10 and goes up to 100. And boys and girls grades are distributed. In a 2D axis, we can see that how this data is scattered. So AX dot scattered, this will create the plot, and we are using these colors, red and blue. So just to identify. Now there are, okay, so quiver plot, sorry, the contour plot actually is when you have a function of 2 variables here, like Z, which is a function of X and Y. So then the contour shows this function's projections on the on a plane of 2 dimensions. So this function, if I show you here, so so the main function is Z equal to square root of X square plus Y square, so that it can be visible in 3 dimensions, but we are not using the three dimensions. So it's like the projection of this function in 2 dimension, and it's different circular cross sections you can think of are shown in this by using this contour plot. And the figure, this color bar is used, so which gives us a variation of the range by this color map. So as we are in the center, which is like 0, but as we go outside from this center, the values increase, and these are shown by these different discrete disks of different colors. So, okay, then some of the plots are, I can briefly, also there are many actually, but everything is not always recorded. So box plot is another important one, which is used for statistics analysis. So here the data is random one. So we are using random seed. So for example, a normal distributed random data is used. So 4 data sets of different collection is used here randomly. And so based on this data, when this box plot is created, so box plot actually shows you a couple of things. So it shows you the minimum here, the maximum here, and the first quartile, median, third quartile, and maximum. So these few things it shows. So for different data, they are like starting and ending at different ranges. So the minimum and maximum here, and they are first quartile and second, the third quartile, they are shown here by this box basically. Okay, now we'll go through some of the 3D plots. So actually, the matplotlib was initially designed to be only 2D, but then some of the 3D functionalities are also added. So for that, we need to import something extra. So this extra import we need to make MPL toolkits and import mplot3D. So this one is just to create a sim, and we also need to add this one, axis plot axis as projection equal to 3D. So this is for 3D space creation. And then if we run this one, so we can see this is just a simple combination of functions. So x is z into some sine function, and y equal to z into cos function. So this creates the 3D contour, which we can use this plot 3D. So x, y, z. So this creates this nice swirling contour in a 3D space. So we can also have this 3D scattered plot kind of thing. So this is also a similar pattern, but it is like a scatter plot in 3 dimension. So here, this one is just ax dot scatter. So that's the only thing. And C is the color map. Okay, now we have 3D contour plot. So we can have, so here again, we need to, okay, creating a function. So we have just seen a 2D contour, but now we can see the 3D contour also. So here we are using a binary color map. So that means just 2 colors, 0 and black and white. And this one is the function that is this x square plus y square. And we are using a sine of its square root. So basically there are ups and downs in this pattern because of the sine function. And the x and y, they are created by using this least space function from -x to plus, sorry, -6 to +6 at the, and total 30 samples are there. Okay, so these are the one. Next, we can have a 3D wireframe plot. So this is a similar plot, but this is changing wireframe. So it looks like more of a wiring kind of thing. So these lines are more visible, and so because the color is black, so it's just in one color. So you can change this color map also. Okay, and then there is this surface plot, which is like a 3D surface. So now we have not created any edge color. The plot surface is like a 3D surface. We are still using the same function. So rest is all same. So this creates a surface type plot. So we can also add some mathematical expression also in the plot sometimes, because sometimes we need to, for our display purpose, we need to add some equations or something. So here, for example, we are using level of, say, a sine twice omega t. So this is the expression that we want to enter in the plot. So This is one, and we can also use the location like these. The first two these numbers, these are the coordinates. We can adjust them accordingly. So the first level was a sine 2 omega t. The second one is like 0.1 and minus 0.5. So here, which is a square root, and these are directly using the LaTeX fonts. So this dollar sign can be used here. Okay. Now, finally, I'll show you some of the easy, simple things with images. So for image, we need to make another extra import, so which is matplotlib.image as MP image. So this is a new one. So here, the first one is mpimage.imread. So imread, this function actually reads the data as an ND array object and stores. And then the plot.imsave, it basically saves the data at your location where this file is executed, and then finally imshow will show you the plot. Okay, so yeah, so this one was just, we are using the default logo of matplotlib. So I have already copied this file by downloading it. So and I have saved it in the same location where this this Jupyter notebook is there. So it's just reading the file here, or else if it is not there, you can just add the path before here. So it will just read from anywhere in your system. And then you can save it also by adding the path and by customizing this data inputs. And finally, imshow will show the figure. Okay, I think, yeah, that's all from my end on matplotlib. So Ananda can take over now and go.
Thanks, Saurav. So I hope that was a good introduction into matplotlib, especially how you can plot a diverse range. So we just tried to give you a comprehensive overview of how you can plot if you have a one-dimensional vector, or you have got two-dimensional images, or you have got three-dimensional volumetric data. As I discussed, so we'll now move on to some advanced analysis with pandas. So just to give a brief idea of what sort of operations and data manipulations you can do with pandas and how you can use that for this purpose. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So we discussed last week briefly about pandas. So which has got three different types of data structures mainly. So you have got a series, you have got a data frame, and then you have got a panel. So series is mainly for a one-dimensional time series type of data. Then you have got data frame, which is for two-dimensional data. Then you have got panel, which is for higher dimensional data. So one is a subset of other. So data frame, so like data frame is nothing but it's a container of series, and panel is a container of data frame. So for example, so these are the main three important data structures that you use to represent any of the data that you may come across using the pandas library. So for example, if you want to discuss series, then say import pandas as PD, then you're importing NumPy. So you declare, say, a NumPy array, np.array of these 4 integers. Then if you want to construct a series from that pd.series, so it will give you this series. Or you can construct a series from a dictionary, so which has got these keys and values. So that would be this. This is a series. Then you have got a data frame, which would be a two-dimensional data structure. So where your data would be arranged in a tabular fashion. So where you have got rows and columns. So for example, something like this. So which is so same list. If you want to construct it into a this thing, so then you have the indices here, and these are the columns. Or you have a dictionary. So where, for example, you have this name, which is the key is name and the value is a list. The key is age and value is the list. So for example, if you want to store this dictionary, which has got keys name and keys age. So you have got 3 names here and corresponding 3 ages. And then you do pd.data frame of data. So now as you can see here, so if you want to just, you can do it 2 ways. So one is this. So then, so if you are giving the indices here, so without giving the indices also you can construct. So you can just do pandas.data frame of this. So we should give you this. So by default, it will assign 0, 1, 2 as indices. Then you have got 1 column for name and 1 column for age. So this one key creates 1 column and this another key creates another column. So you have got these columns. And then if you explicitly assign indices, then it will give you this. So which has got say rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, something like that. So you have got these indices and then for these values. That is for 2D. And then the panel, which is a 3D data. So which is actually what gives the name pandas to this library. It's actually derived from econometrics. So where you use panel data. So from panel data, it's actually derived as pandas. So you have got like a 3D library here where say, for example, np.random.rand of 3, 4, 5. So 3 in first dimension, 4 in second dimension, and 5 in third dimension. So from this, you print this dimensions 3, 4, and 5, 3 items, 4 in major axis and 5 in minor axis. So this, I just mentioned this to sort of as a brief recap. So we did discuss this in little detail last week. So you have got 3 data structures here: series, data frame, and panel. So mostly we'll be using either series or data frame for vectors or 2D data sets. So as I mentioned, when I say data analysis, it has got this sequence of operations. So where you first load the data and then you do the manipulation. So then any visualization, exploration, then advanced analysis. So let's first start with loading the data. So if we are loading the data, so there are different types of file formats. There are, wide varieties of formats, like even when you stick to some, let's remove the images, those sort of files. So if you just stick to say one-dimensional sort of data sets, you would have like an Excel file. You might have like a CSV file, which is comma separated values. And then you would have a JSON file, or even you might have some sort of binary file. You would have it in a say .txt file. So the data can come in a variety of formats, and Pandas gives you the functions to efficiently read the data from any of those files. So we'll just stick to 1 or 2 formats here to give a brief idea. So starting with CSV files, CSV file is a very, very widely used format. So let me just actually show. So for example, CSV file would look like this, which would be an Excel file. Yeah. So for example, here we have got test1.csv. So which would be this. Say you can open it using your Excel file. So where you have got these, say for example, you have these 5 rows and 4 columns. So you have got numeric as well as string types here. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and say Apple 10, 11, 20, 39. So that's one sort of CSV file. Then you can also assign headers to that. So test2.csv, which would be this. So where you have like student, subject, grade, standing, and section. Then you have got these values. So this you can open this CSV file using the standard Microsoft Excel, and it's a very efficient way to most of the one-dimensional data, like in a say in a health informatics sort of thing, or bioinformatics analysis, or any time series data, or might be something related to a general economic sort of data, and it might be any sort of data. Most of these data are normally stored in CSV files. It's very easy, and you can sort of open it using a file reader, and it's readable format as well. So going back to our, how do we read this in our code? So import pandas as PD, right? So it gives a function read underscore CSV, pd.read underscore CSV. So which is to read that CSV file. So we had test1.csv, and there are a lot of arguments you can actually give here, but I'm not mentioning any of those because you can pretty much get the syntax from a standard Google search documentation. But I'll just only mention those which are useful so that it is less confusing and easier to understand. So for example, here you have pd.read underscore CSV, test1.csv, comma, SEP, which is the separator. So you might have in CSV files, you might have the fields separated by tabulars /t, or you might have entries separated by commas. So depending on which separator you have stored your data with, so you can use the appropriate separator. And if you don't use any separator also, it will give you like this here, it will take the default separation is comma. So for example, I read this here. So it treats always the first row as here, like the header. Then from here, it assigns the indices 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I don't mention anything here, it's again same thing. So for example, if I were to give /t, then it would give this. So you can see here, it's actually it actually shows comma here, and because so this is not the perfectly suited separator for this one. So you use comma, you'll get all the data like this. So that is pd.read underscore CSV. So that is, and then you can, how many columns are there? So you can test.data columns. Then, yeah, so that's one thing. So then we come to this, say for example here, pd.read underscore CSV, right? Test1.csv, comma, names equal to fruit1, fruit2, fruit3, fruit4, fruit5 I have assigned. So that will be assigned as the new header. So if I write this, then you can see here, initially this 1357 apple was here, and the index here, it was starting from 0. So now you can see, if you assign this, now it starts from here. So you are getting all the 5 information, and these 5 are the headers. So which is giving you this. So from this, you can access it in a different way. Like for example, I think you can access it like this. So if you want fruit1, then you can use like this. So now you have assigned these 5 keys or header information to this CSV file that you're reading, because it doesn't have it. So using that, you can use a fruit1 values are here, fruit2 values are here. So then, for example, what you can do next is dot values. Oh, sorry, this is not, oh, this is numpy object. Yeah, this one is already numpy object. So which means you can take shape. So it's a flat numpy array. So which is, you can see here, it's a this is I hope we had discussed this before. So like this is a very popular way to, so if you have a flat 1D numpy vector, then you normally have just one dimension followed by a comma and blank. So which means it's a, you can also consider it like a 5 by 1 dimensional numpy array. So that's for this. Then say for example, you want to read test2.csv, which we had before executing this line here. So like for example, I want to read this. So test2.csv, if I read this, I'll get this. So now here the test2.csv already has different fields like student, subject, grade, standing, and section. So that is test2.csv. Now, say for example, you want to read only particular columns from these CSV files. So like you just want to read the subject, and you just want to read the corresponding student. So then you can use a value called index underscore call. So index columns. So you just give the index columns in a list followed by commas. So test2.csv. So you get this and then print this. So if you do this, so you'll get this. So which would give you the subject as well as the students separated here, and then you get this separated here. Now, you can use the columns which you want to set as indices. So using use columns. So which will just give you, these are the columns that you're using, student and the subject. Then let's come to test3.csv, which is this, where you can see this is more like for missing data. So if you do not have data in, like if I go back to test3.csv, so here you can see here in my test3.csv, you can see there is blank here and there is blank here. So we do not have standing for this student for this subject, and we do not have the grade for this student for this subject. Now and this is a very practical problem you will encounter in most of the data analysis applications, because for some or the other practical reason, you may find it difficult or you may fail to capture the corresponding data. So, yeah. So you can see here, NaN is normally, this is what you will get if you have a missing field. So if you, once you get NaN, then there are different ways to handle that. So which we will see later. So you can either ignore it and just calculate your sums, whatever calculations you are doing, or you can replace that with say 0, or you can replace that with some fixed prior entry because you have some prior knowledge about the data set. So it's like if a particular field is missing, then use this value because you have some prior domain knowledge of the task in hand. So there are different ways to handle that. But this missing data, so this is how your missing data would appear. So this is just brief about reading the CSV files. So you have a CSV file which you are reading. Then if you have a data which you want to write to a CSV file, that is pretty straightforward. So like you have this this test underscore data which we read from this CSV, right? So if you want to check this, so it is a pandas, you can see pandas core frame data frame, so which is a 2-dimensional data container. So whatever we read here, pd.read underscore CSV, the test underscore data structure that it gave us a data frame because it's a 2-dimensional data structure where you have got rows as well as columns. Now, if you want to write this into a CSV file, all you have to do is test underscore data you have. So just like how you had pd.read underscore CSV and file name. So here, take this test underscore data, then 2 underscore CSV to convert to CSV, and then write the file name here. So if I do this here, it will write the CSV file. Or we can also do this if we don't want to write the index or the header. So we can keep that as false and write that to CSV file, which is stored on my disk now. So you can, so which is stored on my disk. So you can be here. So if I come back here, then it will be test4.tsv. So which is stored here. So, so that is how you handle comma separated values or CSV files. Then you have got JSON files, which is sort of a binary sort of format. So which is also very widely used to even store some image related information, header information. So for that, again, it's pretty straightforward. Like just like how you had read underscore CSV, you have read underscore JSON. So this, and then same thing, just like you had 2 underscore CSV, you have 2 underscore JSON if you want to write to JSON file. Then you have pickle. Now, pickle module is actually a very powerful algorithm for serialization of data structure in Python. So what it does is, whatever hierarchical data structure you may have, it just like a dictionary you might have, or a nested dictionary you might have, or a list you might have, whatever the data structure is, it just converts all of that into a serialized byte stream and stores it in a pickle file. So so that it's very easy if you want to transmit it or like transmit it or a web or any other things. Then again, you can unpickle it. Like, so for example, for that we have to import a module called pickle, import pickle. Now this is a dedicated separate library for pickle. So using which, say for example, we have got this dictionary data where we have got the keys day and this key is value, and then we have got Monday, Tuesday, and 1 and 2, say. Then import pickle, this is the data, then pickle data would be pickle.dumps of data. So if you do pickle.dumps of data, so it will, you don't need to print this. So this is how it would look like. So this is the pickle data. Then from that pickle data, if you want to load, you will have pickle.load of pickle data. So you'll get back your dictionary. So that is the dedicated library for pickle. And there is one more recent library which is called cpickle, which is an optimized version of the pickle library written using C, and which is much faster and other things. Now this pickle operation you can also do using the pandas structure. So where just like how you had the read CSV, write CSV, you have got the same thing. So for example, I did pd.read CSV, test2.csv, right? So I have this. Then this test data I'm converting to pickle. So test data dot to underscore pickle, test data dot pkl. Pkl is the extension for a pickle file. So I convert that to pickle file. And then now if I read back, I'll get it back. So which is pd.read pickle. So this is a very general. So as you can see, most of them have consistent formats. So you either have pd.read underscore CSV, you have pd.read underscore JSON, or you have pd.read underscore pickle. So these are some file formats. So this is how you would load a data that you want to analyze into your Python code. So once you load the data, what happens is you may have to do a lot of transformations. So for example, you might have data from multiple sources, right? Like you might have data, like you might have files where, let's say you have got a energy consumption related data files for a particular area, and you have got like you have got the CSV files per house. So if there are 10 houses, you would have 10 CSV files, those sort of things. And what you have to do next is, once you load the data, the next step is data manipulation. So which is, before you can analyze the data, convert that raw data you have into an analyzable format. So like merge the data, and if you want to do some transposes, permutation, those things, do all those things and put it into a standard format, which you can then subsequently use for your analysis. Because most of these algorithms, even, and it's also a good practice, as in most of the standard algorithms, or even if you are practically implementing also, normally some of them would be agnostic to the data where it's coming from. So as in whether it is coming from energy related data, or whether it is some, say, some city infrastructure related traffic data, whatever it might be, the source, whatever it might be, ultimately the algorithm expects, say, some two-dimensional matrix where you have rows that represents observation at particular point in time, where you have columns which represents, say, some particular feature which is varying with respect to time, like a energy consumption in watts or something, then the bill that that household has paid. So you would have different features as columns. So these algorithms expect the data in a certain format, like a two-dimensional matrix. So getting the data into that format is what is the next step. And so after reading, you have to pass it through the second stage where you are manipulating the data and everything, and make sure it is sort of in that standard format. So let's quickly have a look at this part, which is data manipulation. So let's start. So there are different types of manipulation things. So for example, you have something called merging. So which is if you want to merge the information from multiple data sources. If you want to concatenate different types of arrays, pandas, so those things are there. So for example, let's start with merging. So we have, say, import pandas as PD. Okay. Now let's define a data frame left. This is pandas data frame. So like how we said, so pd.data frame, right? So you have a dictionary. This is essentially a dictionary, so which you are converting into a pandas data frame. So where you have got 3 keys, one is ID, one is name, one is subject ID. So you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the ID, and then say you have got 3 names, so for 5 names, and then you have got subject IDs, which is 5 subjects. So sub 1, sub 2, sub 4, sub 6, sub 5. Then you have got same, right? Different pandas data frame, IDs, different names starting with B, then subjects. So some of the subjects are common, some aren't. So if you just declare this, so you have got this left and you have got this right. Now, let's say you want to merge these two because these are two different files. Say, let's say you have read these two left and right from two different CSV files, right? Like this is for say some section A and this is for say some section B. And you want to combine them or you want to merge them and to get some common information. So if, for example, I do pd.merge left, right, on equals ID. So if I do that, let's just see what comes. So I get the names. So here you can see I get all the 5 names here, and then I get all the 5 names here. So what it does is it combines based on ID. So here there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here also there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the IDs match. So 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5. So all of them is combined. So then you get you end up with name X, subject ID X, name Y, subject ID Y. So for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 IDs, this name has this subject, this name has this subject. So all of that is combined now into one merge. So for example, if you want to do like from the two classes, whoever has common IDs, combine them and get one single data structure. So where you have got common IDs and you have the corresponding names and subject IDs. So this is what you have once you merge on ID. If instead of merging on ID, if instead of using the ID as the criteria for merging, if you want to, along with ID, if you want to use say subject ID, right? So if I do this, yeah, then I end up with only these two names because where is, yeah, allies and this one, yeah. So here you can see, because here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the IDs are same. So which we got here, but along with the ID, so now that IDs are same, it's given both. Now we had to compare the subject IDs as well. So if you compare the subject IDs, you have see here there is no match here. This is sub 1, this is sub 2. It compares index wise, so sub 2, sub 4. So only this matches, which is sub 6, and sub 5, sub 5. So see, this is where there is a match in ID as well as there is a match in subject ID. So if there is a match in subject ID and if there is a match in ID, then merge both of them. So which is yeah, here. So which is giving you this. So name, there is a match. So for ID 4, ID 5. So in both the sections, the ID 4 and ID 5 represent subject 6 and subject 5. Whereas the ID 1 to 3 in both the sections represent different subjects. You can see here. So ID1 in here represents subject 1, whereas ID1 here represents subject 2. So this is not common to both of them. Then let's say for example, then there are 4 different types of mergings as well. So which, for example, let's say you want to merge based on IDs, as in let's say pd.merge, like how we did here. All this syntax is same, left, right, and on subject ID, and just say how equals to left. Now, what does this how keyword do? What it does is, if I do this here, so you can see here, you have got the names here, so which is there from the start. Then you have got subject 1 to subject 1, 2, 4, 6, 5. Now, the key I am using here is on is subject ID. Now, if I'm using this subject ID, when I'm merging these two, actually this sub 1 here is sub 2. So it's not common. Those things should be dropped, like how I did here. So here only we ended up with these two. Whereas here we are getting all the 5 rows, as you can see. That is because I'm not saying that use from both. I'm explicitly saying use the keys from left. That is the how argument specifies how to determine which keys are to be included. So for example, here, what is the left one? So the left one is this, right? 1, 2, 4, 6, 5. So you include all of them. 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 6, 5. Now you can see there is no sub 1 in the right data frame, right? Because it started sub 2. So if there is no sub 1, that means those things will be considered as NaN, which is missing entry. Because when you are merging these two, if you want to merge, for example, say I have got two data sets from class A and class B, only using the class A key, I want all the information and merge with respect to class B as well. So you are not bothered about which subjects are present in class B or not. If there is subject present, that thing will be filled in here as filled. If there is no subject present, then fill it as NaN. So you are using only the keys from the left as this thing here. So that is one. Same way you go for how equals to right if you want to do the opposite. Then how is equals to outer. How is equals to outer is a union. So it's like set union. So you have, it's like if you consider A and B as set. So what this how specifies is whether you want to use keys from A, whether you want to use keys from B, whether you want to use keys from A union B, and whether you want to use keys from A intersection B. So that will give you 4 different types of merging procedures. So using which you can combine these pandas structures into bigger structure. So here, as you can see, so outer is for union and inner is for intersection. So this is brief idea of how you can merge data from different sources. So you have data from different CSV files. So you want to merge them and get a single data. Just a little extension of that, but somewhat variation of that, just more efficiently, is concatenation. So where you just concatenate the this thing. So here you are not merging based on keys. So here you're just appending the things. So you're not checking whether some particular key is present in both the classes or things like that. So you could probably say, yeah, so you could so you have the unions here like this. So you could like append like this. Like for example, let's say we start with the same pandas data frame. So this is 1, this is 2. So these are some of the standard examples we have from borrowed from some of the open source websites. So which we will share later. So you can use them to build more examples and practice. So you have 2 such structures here, say pd.dataFrame. So name, subject ID, marks code, and index. Same thing for this. So if you want to concatenate, you just do say pd.concat 1 and 2. So it just appends it. So you can see here, even the indices are appended, as you can see. If I run this, so 1, 2, and this. So you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's appended like this. So you can append it using keys so that you have a key X for the pandas data frame from first and this from second. Then you can specify the axis, so which would give you this. So if axis is 1, it's that. If axis is 0, it's just appending like this, a row after row. If axis is 1, it's appending like this, column wise. Concatenation, I mean. Append means you don't have to specify the axis. Append means just appends at the end. So that is just an extension of sort of like merging. So merging, concatenation, what all of these things do is just help you put together a lot of multiple CSV files and data information into one proper data structure. Then you have something called pivoting. So where if you, for example, say you have this data frame, say ID, name, subject ID. So if you want to stack and unstack it, like convert rows into columns and columns into rows, like if I do test frame dot stack, it stacks them as rows. So like for example, you can see here, ID1, name, Billy, subject ID, ID, name. So all of these things appear as rows. If you unstack it, so again, you'll get it back as your original entry. So that is as far as your merging and those things are considered. Then let's say you want to remove certain entries because without those things you want to do the analysis, or maybe they are duplicates, whatever may be the reason. So for example, this is the frame you have. You have got ID here, you have got name here, and you have got subject ID here. So if I do unstack frame dot drop 0, so this particular row will be dropped. So without that row, if I want to do the analysis, that could be dropped. Then let's say we have duplicate entries. So which is this. So here you can write the, you can check this. Like here you have color, white, white, red, red, then white. So and value is 21332. So it's just checking the values. So for example here, false, 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 true, true. So what it does is DF frame dot duplicated. So this is not duplicated, this is not duplicated, this is not duplicated, but this now is appearing for the second time as well as this. So first 3 entries are false and second is true. So if you just want to get which ones are duplicated, so you can just do, what you can do is dframe dot, you can use this dframe dot duplicated as an index and write dframe of dframe dot duplicated, so which will give you the duplicated ones. So this 3 and 4 are duplicated, which is red 3 and white 2. Then let's say you want to replace certain entries. Like for example, here you have got this pandas data frame, so which is this, right? Now you want to replace this also with red. You want to replace this color, particular color with red, and this particular one with green. Then say you define this dictionary. So where here you have this replaced by this. This is the key, this is the value. Then all I have to do is take this pandas data frame, which is frame dot replace with this dictionary. So what it does is when I do frame dot replace of dictionary, so it replaces this particular value here with the corresponding value. So this is the key, this is the value. So here, so you can see here, if I do this, okay. Oh, this are not defined. So this and then this. So you can see here, this after mug, this also is defined as is replaced by red. This is replaced by red. This is replaced by green here. So that's how you would want to replace. Then if you have say missing values, let's say for example this is the missing data. I construct this missing data, so where you have got NaN here, NaN here, NaN here, those things. So then you can do, for example, use this is null function, so which would give you this. So A is false, B is true. So it just checks for this all non-rows. So true here, then false here. So not null will do the opposite of that. So wherever true is here, we'll get false. So it just depends on what binary test you are doing, whether you are checking for whether it is null or whether you're checking for not null condition. Then you can do df.fill NA of 0, which what it does is fill all the non-available, NA is non-available, so all the non-available entries with 0. So if I do that, you can see all of these NA entries are now filled with zeros. Or if you want to just remove them, then you can do df.drop NA, which just drops those entries. So you can just remove those column selectively also. So these are some important things. So which is what we did was, so merging the multiple sources of information, then reorganizing them, like stacking by rows or stacking by columns. And then if you have duplicate entries, if you want to remove certain entries, and then of course, if you have missing entries. So these are by no means, of course, comprehensive. There are a lot of other functionalities, but due to time constraints, we're just limiting to the important ones. So let's say, yeah, that was that. Okay, yeah, we have part 2. So let's quickly. So for example, The matplotlib visualization that Saurav discussed, that is actually wrapped with pandas. So you can actually, even without explicitly using matplotlib, you can directly plot your data using the pandas data frame itself. So you don't even have to venture into explicitly importing that matplotlib and constructing the pyplot and other things. So for example, as you can see here, if you check this, say for this, yeah, so this is the, let's say this is the data frame that you have. So this is the data frame that you have. So here, this is another important function that is very useful. So here you can see I am constructing a pandas data frame from np.random.dis normalized 10 by 4 matrix. So 10 rows, 4 columns, where the columns are a list of ABCD. So A, B, C, D. So all this thing is fine. Now what is this? So this is, if you didn't have this entry, the index would be just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you want to create like a time series data, you could have like pd.date range. So which gives you this. So which is periods 10. So it starts with this. So it gives you the date range in this format. So using that, you're constructing this data frame. If you want to plot this, so all you have to do is just do df.plot. That's it. So that will directly give you the plot. Okay, I think should have. Yeah. Yeah. So I should have given it here. Yeah. So df.plot. So you can see here, you have got the 4 different columns. Let's say this is a time series data where you have got these different time points and different features are collected over time. So then this is A, which is plotted here with blue color. So you can see x-axis is the time and y-axis is, let's say, amplitude. Then A is one time series, B is another time series, C is another time series. So without any of the, because the matplotlib is wrapped with this, so you can directly use these functions with pandas. So if you want to plot the bar graph, then again data frame and then just dot bar, you do this. So these are the sort of functions. If you want to do df.plot.box, so which is give you this box plot. So which is a very important this thing in error bars. So like when you're running an algorithm or when you're doing some data processing, so it might be that you're starting the processing with some random initialization. So you're not getting the exact same result every time. So in that case, normally how you represent data is you run it for say 100 simulations, 100 times, and then get what is the mean. So this bounding box for this box plot here, for example, this green line here represents the sort of say mean or median around which the data is distributed, and the height of the box represents the variance. So when you want to compare with sort of 2 algorithms or 2 approaches, those sort of things is very useful. So these are again the same plots. So the important thing is you can use all of the matplotlib functionalities, most of them, directly with pandas, even without importing matplotlib. So this is one of the key reasons why pandas is widely used, because as you can see from reading the files to sort of manipulating the data to now visualization, it has got all the functionalities by itself. You do not need any external library. So just using pandas, you can do most of the basic of data processing. So that is the thing. So visualization is more like sort of qualitative analysis, right? So you're plotting the graph, from that you are making some interpretations and inferences. You're coming to some conclusions. So then there is quantitative analysis, which is getting some interesting statistics from the data. So which would be, say, for example, we have this data frame. Say we have got the dictionary where you have got the keys as name, age, and rating. So you have got time series here. This is time series. This is time series. So pd.data frame of D. Then print df. So this is my data frame, right? So you have got the name, you have got the age, you have got the rating. So these are 3 columns. So now if you want to do, for example, df.sum, it will directly give you the sum of these. So for example, sum of these columns is this, sum of these is this, and this is also sum, as you can see, because strings also, as we saw earlier in Python. So if you have string A and string B, so if you do A plus B, it will give you AB. It acts as a string concatenation. So that is print df dot sum. So if you just so those things you can do, yeah, then this is there. Then if you want to take, say for example, mean, so it just acts as numerical data. So if you want to construct a mean, so then you would have print df dot mean. So you'll end up with the mean age as well as mean rating. Or say you want to get standard deviation, so it should be df dot std, so which will give you this, so which gives you age as well as rating. So then this then there is this very useful function with the pandas data frame, which is describe, which is if I just write df without doing any of these explicit calculations, I have a pandas data frame. If I just do df dot describe, then it gives you most of the initial descriptive statistics with which you, like whenever in data analysis applications problems, one of the most important thing is the moment you have a data, first thing is you need to understand what are its characteristics. And when I say characteristics, it is like what are the important sort of these measurements using which you can describe that, like what is the mean of this particular, what is the variance, what is the standard deviation, or what is the, so those sort of things, because those sort of things give you a preliminary idea of what the data set is about. Irrespective of what your end goal is, this is usually the first step you always start with. So df, if you just type df dot describe, so it gives you most of this information. So for example, it gives you the count, it gives you the mean, standard deviation, then the minimum and the maximum. Then it gives you the 25% and 75% intervals as well, like interquartile ranges. So you can take like 1/4 to 3/4 here. So 25% to 35%, 75% ranges. So what is the minimum? What is the maximum? What is the mean? So just this single function can give all of that. Then if you want to, if you in the same describe, if you write df dot describe, if you use the keyword include and then write object, then what it will do is it will give you, it will operate on only the columns with strings. So here you can see count 7, unique 7, top Sarah. So as in we started with this and it's only for the string. So obviously here the parameters like mean and variance don't make sense. So this is what it gives when you operate on strings. So frequency is 1 and this is the top one. So there is no duplicates. So you have 7 and out of 7 all are unique. So that's one thing. So then you have this another useful function. So which is, say this, which is percentage change. So if you do that, so what it does is it just gets the successive differences. So you have got 2 minus 1, 3 minus 2, those things divided by the changes. So 3 minus 2 would be 1. 1 divided by 2 is 50%. 4 minus 3 is 1. 1 divided by 4, 3 to 4 divided by 3. So what is the amount of change divided by the original value, which is how you would calculate percentage change. 4 minus 3 divided by 3, 0.33. 5 minus 4 divided by 4, 25%. That would be the one. So that is PCT underscore change, percentage change. Then if you want to calculate covariance matrices, which is another important this thing. So where it describes the relationship between variable A and variable B, like how you calculate correlation, like so you calculate covariance matrices. So you can see here, so we have got one data series S1, another pandas data series S2. So all I have to do is S1 dot COV of S2. So that will give me the covariance matrix of that. Then yeah, let's leave this. Let's skip to this. So which is correlation. So which is Pearson's correlation coefficient. So which I hope you know. So where you find try to find the correlation or relationship between two variables, two vectors, how they are correlated. So where the index varies from 0 to 1. 0 meaning that they are not correlated at all, and 1 is perfect correlation. So if you want to calculate that, so you have this frame dot CORR. So where it considers each column as one variable. So you have 5 variables here. So it calculates the correlation between each possible pair of columns. So you will end up with a 5 by 5 matrix. So where you can see the diagonal entries are 1 because the correlation of that variable column with itself is 1, of course. So that is for this one. What else is so this is pretty much it for this one. So these are some basic descriptive statistics. So where you see, as you can see, there are a lot of basic functionalities. So these are irrespective of what advanced analysis you would do. These are the ones you always start with because they give you a very important idea. Like first you plot the graphs, visualize the data, then you do these basic calculations. So those sort of things. So let's say, for example, let's solve this small example. So which is linear regression. So let's, like, as you would know, so what linear regression is, you just have, say, for example, y is equals to f of x, where you have the x varying with respect to, say, time or something, and you have got y. F is a curve that you want to fit. Now, depending on how the data is distributed, say you fit certain curve. Once you fit that curve, then you can use that curve to make predictions in future. Now, this is one of the most simple and fundamental sort of algorithm in like data machine learning or predictive modeling. Whenever there is a concept of predictive modeling, especially nowadays, obviously everyone tends to jump at, say, advanced machine learning algorithm, some sort of decision tree, or even a neural network. But regression still is the most useful, especially when you have a simpler data. So linear regression or a logistic regression, there are two types. So when linear regression is when you have a value that is continuously varying, and logistic is when you have a categorical type of data. Let us say, for example, this is what we have, right? So we have a vector x, which is this. So 5, 7, 8, so 4, 5, 6. So this is some 13 values here. So and then let us say we have a vector y. Now you want to understand the data. So first thing, you just visualize the data. So which would be PLT dot scatter of x comma y. So if I do that, so it gives me this. Okay. Yeah. So it gives me the scatter data. So which, as you can see, we have got some x here and some y here, right? Now, what we'll do next is, so yeah, this is the data we have. This is the data that we have, x and y. Now we want to perform simple regression. As I mentioned earlier, this scientific Python or Skippy is one of the very useful library for performing these sort of basic and useful mathematical these things. So for example, we do here stats dot linear regression of x comma y. So it does linear regression here. So now here you can see from Skippy import stats. So it has got a submodule like how we discussed Skippy dot integrate or this dot optimize dot signal processing, those sort of things. So we import the stats module. Once we take this, so it gives us a very simple linear regression, which is fitting a straight line. As you would know, equation to a straight line is y is equals to mx plus c, where m is the slope and x is your input and c is the intercept, and you end up with the output y. So all regression does is finding the value of m and c, because so you are given some 10 values of x and y. So using those values, you determine the m and c. Once you know m and c, then you end up with your equation, which would be, say, y is equals to 2x plus 3. Then for a new x, you will know what is y. So which is sort of how roughly this predictive modeling works. So here, if we do linear regression of x comma y, it gives me a particular slope as well as intercept, which I am, for example, I define a separate function here. So using this slope and using this intercept, I define this function which is slope times x plus intercept. So which becomes mx plus c. So this is my y. So y is equals to mx plus c. So this function, what it does is it accepts. So to be more clear, so let's just keep it like this. So yeah. So here, once I determine using this given data, once I perform regression, I do mx plus c. Now this function now accepts x and returns you y, because we have already determined what is slope and what is intercept. So if I do that, so this is my straight line that I have fit. Now obviously, as you can see, this is not a perfect fit, but still this straight line is passing through most of these. You can see the points are distributed around these straight lines. So using that, I am able to fit this straight line. So now if I get a new x, so for example here, say my x is 10, so it will give me new value of y. So I hope this is clear. So this is a very preliminary example of how regression works. This is obviously, as you can see here, this is obviously not a perfect fit. Like you would, like there are ways where you can find what is the goodness of fit and those parameters. So which are these things. So here, for example, you can, if you, so here you can see this 75%, this indicates sort of goodness of it. Then there is the standard error, which is STD error. What is the error? Then you have the slope and intercept, which would be slope is minus 1.75 and the intercept is 103.10. So you can see here from the figure as well, the negative slope. If it was an increasing slope, it was a positive slope, then the line would be the other way around. So you can see from here as well that it is a decreasing slope with increasing x. Yeah, so at larger values of x, you have lesser values of y. So it's a decreasing slope curve. So this is sort of curve fitting. These are the sort of things which we will build upon in next session. Let me briefly touch upon, say, one more example before we leave. So for example, let's say, for example, read the GDP per capita data from a given CSV file and construct a histogram to compare the differences between different continents. So for example, let's say we have, let us say we have this CSV file, which is countries.csv. So this is the data set that is given to us. So which, when I open here, you can see there are different columns here, which is country, continent, year, say life expectancy, then what is the population, then what is the GDP, which is just economic units, GDP per capita. So you've got different columns here, which is spread over here, and you have got the different continents and different countries. Now, how we can start with this sort of data is, for example, do the import pandas as PD, then do this, right? So countries is equals to this one. So now you just take the countries in the year 2007. So what you can do is, so if I print this, for example, so you can see here, country, continent, year, life expectancy, population, and GDP per capita. So we want to do the analysis only for the year 2007. So what we will do is countries dot year. Wherever it is equals to 2007, take those data. So countries of countries dot year equals to 2007. So this will give us the data from 2007. So if I print this now, so if I print this now, then I'll end up with only the data for 2007. Now inside this, that is first. Now in the year 2007, I want to make the comparisons only between Asia and Europe. So which would give me countries underscore 2007 dot continent equals to Asia, countries underscore 2007 dot continent equals to Europe. So if I get that data, then I'll get only for the Europe and Asia. So now if I do, say for example, I'll do set of this. Now why set? Because to ensure there are no redundancies. So if I do this, so I'll get, say there are 33 countries in Asia for 2007 for my comparison purpose, and there are 30 countries in Europe for year 2007. So essentially what I'm trying to do is take the 33 countries from Asia and take the 30 countries from Europe and then compare their GDP per capita. So here, for example, plot hist, that is the function that we can use, like how we discussed in the matplotlib features. So we have got the Asia 2000. So here you can see plt.subplot. So we have got 2 rows, 1 column, and this first and this second. So you add the title, you add the y label as Asia, y label as Europe. Now here 0 to 50,000, so GDP per capita. You take the Asia underscore 2007 dot GDP per capita. So you'll get that column. Then you define the range and the bin width. So that will give you the histograms. So this would be your histogram. So which is which would give you like how the sort of where they are distributed and those sort of things. So where the peak is there and all those values. So you can see the higher peaks here in the European countries, whereas somewhat lower in Asian countries. So depending on different these things. So this is some brief introduction into the basic analysis using pandas. I think we'll stop here for today. If I get into some other advanced topics, then it would be it's already too late. And because of these lot of concepts that we had to teach, we did not do the HackerRank today. But next week we will, along with some advanced concepts and some basic machine learning things for those libraries, we will also have 1 or 2 project sort of things on HackerRank, and for which we might like have some small prizes sort of things if you submit that onto the HackerRank, so some sort of a mini contest sort of thing. So which the details the organizers will announce later. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me from today. If the organizers want to make any further announcements, or if you guys have any doubts, please feel free.
Thank you, Nandakishore. Do we have any questions for Nandakishore or Saurav? No? All good? If you get any questions related to the workshop, please feel free to email us. You have our email address, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So I would like to thank everyone for attending the workshop, and a big thanks to Nandakishore and Saurav for the great delivery of the workshop again. For next Tuesday, we have Nikki Rosso giving a talk on robotics in Australia, focusing on telepresence, social and educational robotics at 5 p.m. So I look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday and in the upcoming events of the symposium. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. See you.